Hi, how are you doing? How are you doing? Uh, this is a video in the time of coronavirus, and I hope everyone has managed to kind of navigate this fairly well so far. For this course, hey, surprise, we're online, and we're already online. And so my first reaction to that was, oh, okay, well, we don't really have to change anything. But in practice, I think we do. So I just wanted to kind of throw this video out, recorded at an ungodly hour and probably unedited. So just deal with my foibles here as I go forward. I'm making some changes to the course, and also I wanted to talk a little bit about what this means in terms of internet culture as well, since it is going to be a big part of what happens with the coronavirus. So before I do that, I do want to do what you're probably hearing a million times already and talk about what you should be doing outside the course. And I want to talk about it in terms of, uh, I guess, some of your expectations and duties, which sounds horrible. There's these movies, which I admit I haven't seen, but I've seen the premise for them, which is if you could push this red button, we'll give you $1 million, but someone on the planet will die. And it's a ridiculous setup because that would never happen. And what really happens is what's happening right now, which is you're being asked to social distance. Many of you have already been doing that. I've not seen anyone outside my family in person for a week now, nearly a week. So many of you have already voluntarily done this, and some of you are being asked and deciding that you don't want to or you can't. And that's the latter part is especially understandable. But this version of the red button question is a little bit strange because you know, it's you don't get $1 million for pushing the red button and killing someone. You like get to go to the movies, or you get to go to the gym, or in some cases, you get to go to work. And that one last one's a little trickier, but generally speaking, it's a very strange trade-off, right? You're being asked to do these things to stay home partially for your own protection, but mostly for many of you in the class. I'm probably one of the more at-risk people in the class. There are some folks who are older than me who may also be at an equal level of risk. For most of you, if you get the novel coronavirus, chances are you're going to live. You may have permanent lung damage, but there's a good chance that you will live through the experience because you're young enough and you're healthy enough. So in many cases, that social isolation or social distancing is not for your sake; it's for the sake of someone in your community. And it is this weird. I kind of want to do a cartoon series about the stay-at-home person. Sort of this version of the superhero who manages to save people's lives by staying home and watching Netflix. Because that's kind of what the decision metric here is. There's a lot of vagueness in terms of what we know and what we don't know, but there's also a lot of evidence that's getting uh, buried under nonsense, both online and in the popular press and in popular discourse. What we know for sure is that, at least for the foreseeable future, the number of cases in Arizona are going to continue to double, probably every 3 to 4 days. We know that we don't have good metrics on that because we don't have good tests. As of the time I'm recording this, we have 13 known cases. And so, the expectation would be that by Wednesday that goes up to about 26. But the big piece there is known cases. In places like Italy and in South Korea and others, we've managed to have fairly good numbers about that. So I suspect that once tests become more widely available, we're actually going to accelerate on that curve a lot more than we expected. Mind you, doubling is pretty tough as it is. It means that we'll have, 24 cases by the middle of this week, 100 cases, 200 cases, 300 cases in the next week or two. And our first deaths by almost inevitably, our first Arizona deaths within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So on that uplifting thought, I just want to really encourage you to do the one thing we know. We don't have a cure. We don't have a vaccine. We don't even really have a good therapeutics at this point. And we know we have a hospital system that is unlikely to be able to meet this challenge. So the one thing that we know that we can do is not buy toilet paper. It is to simply stay home. Get some food in if you can, but don't go out for other reasons, and make your time at home. I would say that's a really depressing thought. I mean, even for me, I'm pretty happy away from people. Like, I feel uncomfortable when people are within 6 feet of me anyway. So, this is for those of us who are introverts. It's not as bad as it is for some, perhaps, but it is a bit daunting. Uh, I would say one of the things that we might use this as is, from a personal perspective, is something of a reset button. It is messing with our rituals. It's messing with the patterns of our lives. But what that means is that it gives us a chance to redesign these. I don't want to be incredibly Pollyannish. I got quoted in a Washington Post article a day or two ago, it was Friday or something, where I was kind of saying, oh, well, this is going to bring us all together. We're all going to be happy. It's going to make it better for everybody. Um, I don't think that that's true. I think that it's going to be incredibly disruptive, especially to those who get sick or who have loved ones that they lose or who have loved ones that are very sick for a period of time. It's going to be devastating to our economy. That's just unavoidable. And so, I don't want to make light of that. On the other hand, there's a phrase in Japanese, which is, shogunai. You can't really do much about that. What we can affect is what we can affect. And so this might be a good time to try to use that disruption to your advantage in personal ways. And I hope that's what I'm going to try to do for me and for my family. And I hope you're able to do that as well. I know many of you are facing kind of larger challenges. So I do hope that you'll try to do that. The other article I was quoted in was that the first one was in the Washington Post. The second was in the Boston Globe, which was about the upcoming baby boom. I'm not sure that would be the best choice. Somehow I broadcast my sex life to the entire reading audience of Boston, which was not my intent. But anyway, I hope you will do something productive, but maybe not reproductive. Well, that's up to you. It's none of my business. But you hopefully you can use this time in productive ways. More Netflix, less chill. Uh, I hope you also will be able to stay connected and keep connected. I called my mom. I should do that way more often than than when there's a pandemic. But I hope you'll make use of this time to reach out to those who you can support, frankly, and who may be able to support you. So make sure you're reaching out. This is a very isolating process, but it doesn't have to be. We have technologies that allow you to reach out and meet up with folks. My brother is in Spain, which is under complete lockdown now, and so we're setting up time for the cousins to talk to each other and that sort of thing as well. So, use the technologies we have to try to make human connections. Clearly, that's right in line with some of the things we're talking about this semester. But I hope you'll do it aside from the course, kind of in real life. So, as I said, I don't think we need to make any. I didn't think we needed to make any course corrections. That said, many of you are taking this course. You're not entirely online. You're taking offline courses too that are in this weird transitional period. And luckily, this happened over, some of the rapid changes happened over our break. But as we're coming back to classes today, I know from my fellow faculty that a lot of people are struggling to very quickly move their offline courses online. And there's frankly a great deal of disruption and confusion in the process. As a result, I'm going to make some changes. The first of those changes is that this week you all have a 60 in discussion. I'll ask some questions kind of related to how the virus might be affecting our use of social media and our use of the internet. However, if you do not comment at all, you still get the full 60 points. The reason for this is frankly simply to buy you some time for your other courses and for your life. I know how disruptive this is for many of you, and I want to make sure that you have some chance to get your feet under you. And I think that's important and to prepare for the coming weeks and months. So take some time. I mean, you won't be able to. You have lots of other demands, but I'm fine with you putting a pause on this course for this week. I also extended the deadline, even though I said it was due during the break. I noticed that a lot of people hadn't had a chance to comment, and I can imagine why. And so if you comment by Tuesday night on week 8, that's the week from before break, I will still count it. I started to do the grading and then realized that a lot of people hadn't commented at all. And I wanted to make sure there was no confusion, but I also wanted to give people a chance to catch up. So again, to repeat those two, week 8 is you still have a chance to go back and look at the videos and readings and comment on week 8. Week 9 is kind of, well, it's this week, but you do not have to do anything for week 9 between now and next Tuesday, or now and the end of the week, basically. I would suggest you use that time wisely uh, to work on other things. The exception to that is I'm not going to change the deadline on the first sort of part of History of the Future. It'll just compress us too much as we go into the end of the semester. However, that's the easiest of the steps. So my thought is that it will not take forever for you to do that if you choose to do it. And then week 10, I'm going to have to, I'll have an announcement up that decides which of the topics I kind of remove to make space for this week for us to think. And I'll probably just kind of move things down the road a little bit and pull out some of the topics that I had hoped that we would cover. Let's see. So just to change gears for a minute. So that's the nuts and bolts piece. What about this idea of the intersection between the novel coronavirus and the pandemic and what that means for internet culture and politics? It's hard to, this is kind of, it's certainly nothing I would want, but it's a really interesting kind of case that really kind of pushes these things into relief. I think we touched on this. We may not have. E.M. Forster's short story called "The Machine Stops," and it's a story from, wow, almost a century ago now, in which the character has each of the characters has become completely mediated in their interactions with others. There's been some kind of ecological disaster on the planet's surface, and so people are in these mediated pods where they interact. A lot of this is a discussion between the character and his mother, and they're they don't meet in person. They are completely separated, and they just kind of move around in these pods and are able to kind of get around a little bit, but also are able to talk to one another through these. And the idea of meeting someone in person is just bizarre to them. It seemed like it was really before its time, because this idea of being moved away from in-person connections to mediated communications was pretty extreme at the time. But that's kind of where we're moving. We're moving to kind of, it's a thought experiment that's become a real experiment, which is this: what if all of a sudden it wasn't just convenient to order things delivered to your house, but it was the only real way to get things like food and supplies and the rest of it. Now, that's not quite true yet, right? You can still go out to the market. In Phoenix, at least, you can still go out to restaurants. You shouldn't, but you can. But we are moving toward that idea of, for those who can or are able to, of them basically turning their homes into castles and doing most of what they do within the house during the day. Sort of well, it's not quite a prison, but we make it into that, right? It's a self-imposed exile of some sort. So this is I remember during the late 1990s, early 2000s, when they talked about people who kind of checked out of society. There was a Wired magazine article about someone who tried to do this for 30 days to see just how much they could do at home without leaving. Now that was kind of a novelty at the time, right? Like, how much could I actually do? Can I order pizza online? None of that is weird anymore. Like, this is not, we have the technologies to do this without it becoming incredibly onerous. And so for most people, again, there are certainly those for whom this is going to be extremely difficult, especially those who cannot work from home, which is the majority of people who work. And it's likely the majority of you who are working. So I don't want to minimize that at all, but we do have this kind of natural experiment of people moving online. And I know that among many of the people that I work with, obviously, and those that I have worked with, and my spouse is is an attorney, and so her firm has closed its doors and everyone is working from home. A lot of us had experience from working from home before. You've seen this background because this is my house. This is where I recorded all my videos. It's not a green screen yet, although probably I'll be moving that direction too, for a virtual environment so you don't have to see my mess. But, you know, we have this perfect example of how this might work, of what happens when people move most of their lives online. And so that gives us a chance to rethink some of these questions about connections between each other. I mean, it's also true that during periods of isolation like this, a lot of the social platforms were born. You know, if you look at where a lot of these things were born, they were often at universities in Wisconsin and in Michigan and in Iowa, and usually during the winter. And why was that? It was because people couldn't really go out and get around. You know, a lot of them were looking for ways to interact, to make it easier to work at a distance, and that's why they came up with these technologies. Everything from the earliest of the modems to things like BBSs to things like Slashdot to peer-to-peer systems. You know, all of these were developed during the winter in the Midwest, and so it may be that we have a period here where people are looking for new ways to use these technologies. We have a lot of K through 12 kids. My kids are at home, and lots of other kids are at home right now. And so people are rapidly trying to think about, okay, how do we give them not just education, which has been available? A lot of these platforms are either being out of the kindness of their hearts or otherwise are providing their wares for free in terms of sort of online education for K through 12. But we're finding very quickly that's not the only piece that you have to do. And for example, my kids are you know, busily reading and figuring out how to set up their own Minecraft server, not because they want to play Minecraft, they can do that on their own, but because they want to set up a server for the kids in their class so they have a place to kind of have virtual recess. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to be trying to be innovating around social stuff in this space. And it's worth thinking about. There's a great book that I might point you towards, um, that during that the kind of the good side, the happier side of natural and man-made disasters is it often brings communities together. I can think of these events that, and I spent a lot of time in California, and so you probably have thought about these too. In Syria, if you've been to California or lived there, you know that like after serious earthquakes, people want to help, and you know, you start to feel, first of all, you get to meet your neighbors. This is the ongoing joke, right? You live in a building and you've never met the neighbors on any side of you, but when you have to vacate that building because it might fall down, you get outside and you get to chat with your neighbors, right? It's the only time you get to be sociable. But even more than that, especially up in the Bay Area when there were large earthquakes, they had to tell people to stay home because people wanted to go and help in some way. They wanted to help save people. They wanted to help rebuild things. My sister was in Indonesia during she's a surfer who basically that's her life now. She surfs the world, and she happened to be in Indonesia during the tsunami, and so she spent 3 months there helping the people that had supported, you know, who had kind of helped her out locally, helping them to rebuild their homes and that sort of thing. And so I think it does. Natural disasters bring up our most community spirit, you know, our greatest community spirit. And we have lots of research now that shows that actually that this kind of community um, capital, social capital is built during this time. So communities that have undergone extreme uh, disasters and that sort of thing are often stronger communities because they grow closer together. People come together and help. The irony of this, of course, is in this particular case, we're being asked to socially distant ourselves. In other words, we can't really come together in the physical sense that we would during during other natural or man-made disasters. So we can't come together physically to work together. At least we can't in the same ways, or we shouldn't in the same ways. So what that means is that maybe we get a growth of social capital in online communities. I don't know how we're going to figure out if that's happening or not. You know, I'm not seeing it right now. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm seeing it a little bit in some Facebook groups and people coming together and trying to help each other out. And certainly around my colleagues, there's a lot of people offering help, you know, professional help and other kinds of help. And so I'm seeing some of that. I'm seeing that on Twitter. I'm seeing it actually in a number of places, but not in any way that is cohesive or ongoing. And so it'll be interesting after 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 weeks whether that is really something that comes about, whether we can see indications that people are more trusting online, that they're trying to be more pro-social, that they're trying to help each other out. Um, the other piece of this, of course, is that it's not just a virus that's affecting us physically. There's a plague of uncertainty. Some of that is because we just don't know that this is novel, not just in its name. It is a pandemic that is, it's not unprecedented. Of course, we've had large scale pandemics, HIV/AIDS, the Spanish flu, that have killed millions of people, right? And this hasn't gotten there yet. It will most likely get there, but it hasn't gotten there yet. So it is somewhat novel on that front. And as a result, we don't have good information. Now, I would argue that part of the reason we don't have good information is because the institutions we traditionally have relied on, particularly the federal and state governments, have done a really poor job of coordinating their message and their efforts. So this isn't just by accident, but some of it is that it is just a really a period in which we have a lack of good information that we can draw on. So what happens during periods of low information? This is pre-internet. This is actually pre-human. This is sort of a primate issue, is that in periods of high uncertainty, we tend to move towards gossip. And the internet, in some ways, well, the internet was made for porn, according to Avenue Q, but it was also made for gossip. And so this kind of spread of misinformation is already likely online. It's already happening online. It's already been a problem online for the last as long as we could think of, but especially over the last 4 or 5 years. And now we're hitting a period of acute uncertainty when people are not really sure what's true and what's not. And there's a serious concern that the internet will accelerate that. That's part of the reason I led with the social distancing piece. I mean, if you talk to any epidemiologist, they will tell you that the social distancing is the only real tool we have um, to slow the expansion of the disease in the U.S. It's unlikely we'll stop it, but we can slow it enough that we may have higher survival rates, right? But that simple message, and that message along with wash your damn hands, um, you know, uh, uh, don't wear a mask unless you already have symptoms and you're trying to protect others. Some of those messages are getting out, but that last one, that social distancing may be the thing that saves the most number of people's lives, is getting kind of washed out, right? You have politicians who are going to restaurants saying how happy they are and how you should go out and make sure that your local restaurant um, gets enough business during this low period. You should, but you should do that by buying a gift certificate if that's what you want to do, and then using it later when you aren't going to kill people by going out to a restaurant. You're getting all of these mixed messages. Then you're getting like all of this weird, the Chinese designed it, the U.S. designed it, just these standard kind of Alex Jones crap, which is kind of sweeping away any of the more reasonable, scientifically based information that might be spread otherwise. So it's kind of this perfect storm for irrationality, and in the one time when we really need good information, it's um, it's maybe not giving us our best shot at that. Anyway, so first of all, I hope you're all healthy. I hope you are prepared as well as you can be. I hope you are taking a chance to prepare yourself a bit. You know, and I'm curious, what are you doing to help yourself? In other words, what are you doing for yourself to prepare yourself for this? How are you reducing your own anxiety? It's perfectly natural to be anxious about all of this. I'm one of those people who is, despite that article I told you about, at heart a pessimist, and so anything I see, this is expected in some ways. It was going to happen sooner or later, and so it's easy to be an optimist for me during periods of extreme stress. But I'm wondering, like, how are you doing this? How are you figuring out what to do? Where are you getting your information? And how are you controlling the natural response, which is to be anxious about the future? And then aside from how are you helping yourself, how are you helping your community? In other words, what steps have you thought about that you can take that will help those around you, if at all? Um, and and then how do you think this might change going forward? ASU says, I think that the latest, and again, I should know this, but I think that the latest is still, they've said we're online for 2 weeks and then going and then reassessing, or at least 2 weeks. In the case of my kids' school, that's what their announcement was. That we'll be, socially isolating for 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks. But every indication is that this will go on, at least into early April. That's kind of the best case scenario. We're looking at many weeks or potentially many months before people can be interacting in public and not be risking other people's lives. And so have you thought about what that means in the medium to long term for how you kind of get yourself through a period that's going to be economically very challenging, and challenging in terms of your social lives, and then ultimately challenging in terms of your health and physical life too? What is it that you've done to kind of plan that out and make sure that you have the resources you need and the resources that your community needs to make sure that is working for you? Um, Finally, just I won't say to what was I think a public leader has said, just chill out or relax, and don't chill out or relax. I can't, if I tell you that, it's not going to help you any. But I do hope that you take a moment and kind of and try to calmly think through it and do whatever you need to do to kind of reduce your anxiety around it. I know that some people think it's just a lot of hype, and so the best thing to do is ignore it. And I don't think that's the case. I think you do have to come up with a plan that is workable and that makes sense given the new reality. But I do hope that that you are getting connected to the resources you need to have that happen. If there's something I can do to help, I hope you'll reach out. If there's something that as a course, as a class can do to help you as a community, I hope you'll reach out to us as a group as well. And we'll make it through all of this. And I'm hoping that this course is not one of the things that adds to your anxiety, but gives you a chance to maybe air some of these things out without more stress in your life. All right. Thanks very much. Have a good week. We'll be back on normal schedule as of next week. And I'll see you then. Bye.